Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today we are joined again by Professor Said Mohammed Marandi, who was also a former advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiation team. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I was gonna say how is it going there, but I guess it must be quite stressful in the middle of a war. So you're there in Tehran at the moment, and it looks as if some of the nature of the war will change. That is, the United States says, well, more or less suggests it's going to join the war fairly soon. Again, it keeps the usual ambiguous tone that it might or might not, but given that Israel is struggling and its air defenses seems to be running shorter and well running out. Uh, it seems very likely that the U.S. is going to join the war, and I guess Trump has suspended of all pretenses that this is not America's war. When he says that we demand complete surrender of Iran, it's very hard. It doesn't really conform with the idea that this is Israel's war. So, how are you assessing the situation in terms of the United States taking a more direct role?
Well, life in most of Iran is normal. At the beginning of this unprovoked war, this joint US-Israeli war, the government and the administration, they in Tehran, they allowed many government employees, most government employees, to work from home so that they could leave the city if they feel necessary. And so Tehran during the past few days has become much less crowded. And so, for example, here at Press TV, the building is empty, and I have permission to use the building because this is the only place where we have the internet works well enough for me to do these interviews. So, but Press TV is still active. They're in a different place, a protected place, and their employee. The structure in which the country is working right now has changed, but it is functioning. And morale is high because people have united. Iran has always been a united country, but it is united far more than before. This is an open act of aggression. After the strike, the Europeans and the Americans supported the aggression. After the attack on nuclear installations that are monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency regularly, and the threat of radioactive contamination, the West continued to support the aggression. So for ordinary Iranians, this is outrageous. And I think it has proven a point to those Iranian liberals who were leaning to the West or who thought that the West is meaning Western regimes, the political establishment, that we can speak with the West, that some things are just misunderstandings, and if we're flexible, they'll behave more reasonably. I think it's been proven to them that the political establishment in the West is completely irrational. They have no red lines. They are genocidal. They're murderous. But for the bulk of Iranian population, this is what they were expecting. We've come to see for the last 20, 21 months in Gaza, the genocide and the genocidal strikes on Lebanon and how they use ISIS and Al Qaeda in Syria. For most Iranians, this only strengthens their resolve, but for many others, a significant minority, let's say, it has, how should I put it? It has, it has, it has fractured their worldview in a way which I have not seen before.
Yeah, I heard similar things from Russia before, which was that during the Cold War, no one really believed their own authorities, the Soviet authorities, that the West were really planning aggression against them, but now they do effectively. So I think the point you're making as well that uh, yeah the the Western countries, we've, I think, thrown away a lot of the credibility. And as you suggest, I think the natural reaction then is more unity within Iran, as there's, well, yeah, how, well, what would the dissent be now? Would it be to support attack on their own country, look the other way with genocide or attack on nuclear reactors? This is, yeah, I can imagine why this would be something that could, yeah, unify Iranians. But what is happening on the ground though? Because we don't, well, we get some pictures, of course, on social media, the news networks, they have their own spin. But it's quite obvious that both Iran and Israel are hitting each other hard with missiles. But yeah, the Israelis now have put very strict limitations. They don't permit yeah, footage being leaked. But again, there's not so much you can do. So, what do you assess though there from Tehran? What's going on the ground?
Well, the Iranians are hitting the Israeli regime very hard. We have to remember that Iranian missiles have huge warheads, and the damage that they do is far greater than the Israeli regime missiles or the drones that they use. The drones are usually small. The missiles have a larger warhead, but the Iranian missile warheads are very large, and the damage they do is enormous. The Iranians are arresting a lot of people. Obviously, the Israeli regime has been recruiting people for many years now. A lot of them are from the Afghan refugee community. There are millions in Iran, but of course, most Afghans have nothing to do with this at all. But it just shows that they come, the border, Afghanistan is destroyed thanks to the United States for the 47, 48 years of destruction that they brought about on the country. So some of these people are desperate and poor, and desperate people may sometimes do very disgraceful things. But many are being arrested. Afghans themselves are informing the police, and many are ordinary Iranians who are also involved. They're being arrested, and the public is very active. As soon as someone sees something suspicious, they go and call the police or the intelligence agencies. And the public in smaller cities, they go and surround military bases and check the land and seek and look for devices that may be planted. And so the public has mobilized to defend the country. And but also a lot of the drones come from outside. They come from Iraq, some they come from Syria, and some say they also come from the Republic of Azerbaijan. I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't be surprised. But in any case, Iran's air defenses have, after the first few hours, when Iran wasn't prepared, and uh, the apparently there was some, you know, what is it called in English? They were successful in disrupting air defenses uh, through electronic warfare initially, and by hacking the systems into different areas. But that was resolved after the first few hours of war. And and the missiles, of course, they are getting through, and Iran is uh, trying to finish the Israeli air defense capabilities. So they're really playing with the Israelis. So on the whole, I think things are going well for Iran and very poorly for the Israeli regime. And that's why Trump is now being dragged into this. And he's pushing for or he's being pushed towards a direct conflict with Iran. Now, uh, the guard came here and coughed, saying that I should end this, but don't worry about it. So the you can delete this small piece, this bit. So what was I saying? So yes, So I think on the whole, the situation for Iran is better. Those commanders who were murdered on the first day, and which was no great achievement by the Israelis. Many of them were bombed in their homes, and their homes are not secret. They are citizens in Iran. It's like, so they bombed their whole apartment blocks, slaughtering everyone inside to murder a couple of people, slaughtering women and children. That's what the Israelis did. And 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 they've also assassinated a professor of AI in Iran. They've assassinated. They've bombed automobiles uh, on the highways. Just yesterday, two families were wiped out. One car, there was a woman who was about to give birth. She was about 8.5 months pregnant. That's what the Israelis do. But so a lot of the drones are being downed, and I said a lot of people are being arrested. Their defenses are working well, but of course it's war, and the Israeli regime has the full support of the United States and the British and the West in carrying out this assault. Bases in our region, in Turkey, that controlled by the U.S., in Turkey, in Qatar, and Oman, and Bahrain, and the Emirates, and elsewhere. They're also in Kuwait. They're also being used. Well, the U.S. has bases. I don't know in Kuwait if they have radar, but they're all being used both for to help Israeli regime defense and offense. And of course, the Americans and the British uh, and the others, they're actively trying to bring down Iranian missiles. They're doing the heavy lifting when it comes to Israeli defenses. And of course, Jordan is allowing Israel to use and the Americans to use its airspace. So it's basically Iran against the collective West, and regional regimes are basically in the American camp, whether it's Turkey or Qatar or the Emirates or Saudis. Many of them probably don't want to be in the American camp as things stand, but they're bound to the United States.
It, yeah, I was also wanting to ask about the targets of Iran though, because I've seen not only hitting the fuel depots in Haifa, but also saw this morning that the Israeli stock market had been hit as well. Is it a priority of military as well as economic pressures, or what is it that yeah, what is Iran going after?
Well, the Israeli regime, as I said, they're hitting hospitals. They hit a hospital in Kermanshah. They hit the Red Crescent building in Tehran yesterday. So they're targeting civilians. They're targeting uh, civilian infrastructure, and the West, of course, is completely indifferent about all of this. But what the Iranians want to do is they want to strike their economy and their military. The Iranians want to make sure that the Israeli regime, regrets this war, and that those people of influence in the regime, the wealthy and the powerful, that they're the ones who pay the real price, so that uh, they will force the regime and their friends in the regime to end this. But Iran is determined that it will not appease the United States or the Israeli regimes, and they're determined to make sure that the Israelis are defeated in this onslaught. And it may take a long time. And of course, if the Americans get involved, this is going to be a much more deadly war, but it will have huge implications for the world because Iran's ability to strike at the United States is much greater than its ability to strike at the Israeli regime. To strike the Israeli regime, you have to use long-range drones, long-range missiles. The Persian Gulf is, if anyone looks at the map, it's not very wide, it's pretty long, and the Iranians control one side of it. That's why it's called the Persian Gulf. And so Iran has many, many underground drone and missile bases across the Persian Gulf and deep inside Iran. They've been preparing for a US attack for over 2 decades, especially since the invasion of Iraq. So Iran is far more prepared to protect itself against the United States than against the Israeli regime. The Israeli regime is a sideshow. They're not that important. The threat is the United States. Israel without the United States is nothing. We're seeing that today. But the United States has its bases in oil and gas rich family dictatorships across the Persian Gulf. And Iran will carry out decisive actions uh, in the coming days. And that is obviously going to lead to a catastrophe in the global economy. It will lead to a catastrophe everywhere. No one will be left untouched. I think it will change the face of the world. The world economy will be something very different from what it is today. Perhaps tens, if not hundreds of millions of people will be on the move. I think it'll be far worse than the Great Depression of the previous century, when there's no oil and gas. And it's not just oil and gas from the Persian Gulf. It means West Asia, Caucasus. I think that will come to an end. So hopefully Trump will not make that stupid move. He is a fool. We see how he talks like he doesn't even speak like he doesn't even speak like a mafia chief. He speaks like a thug. And well, he is a thug. But and if you compare his language to the language of the Iranian Ayatollah Khamenei and see how he responds, and you see the total difference in Ayatollah Khamenei speaks eloquently, politely, but with very firm. Trump speaks like a gangster in some neighborhood somewhere. So this is the divide, and I think I don't believe that there's a chance in the world that the Americans will win. I don't believe that the Israeli regime will win. These are painful days for Iranians, but we will see this through.
Yeah, that takes me nicely to, I guess, my next question, which you, yeah, to a large extent did answer. That is the extent to which Iran is prepared for an attack by the United States. Because you mentioned a few possible targets, but I was wondering, how likely is it that Iran will shut down the Strait of Hormuz, not just to, I guess, disrupt some of the economic activity, but it will also put much of the, yeah, Persian Gulf almost in a cauldron. That is, whatever American ships would be left there. What are the thoughts behind it? And do you see this as being likely as if the United States attacks? And just an additional question: how far could Iran strike American targets? Would it be possible to strike, for example, the military base on the island of Diego Garcia? How far would Iran go or can go?
Well, Iran has capabilities that no one knows about. And I think already the Americans and the Israelis have come to the recognition that they underestimated Iran. And that shows the limits of US and Israeli intelligence. They pretend to know everything, but obviously they don't. But I think it's not just about shutting the Strait of Hormuz. If the oil and gas installations are destroyed or severely damaged, there won't be oil or gas to go through the Strait of Hormuz. If the tankers are sunk, badly damaged, and destroyed, there won't be any tankers to go through the Strait of Hormuz. And then, of course, if the Strait of Hormuz is closed too, then it's just everything is over for years. And we have to keep in mind that the United States lost against Yemen. And Yemen has the ability to close the Red Sea. And they said they will do this if the United States initiates war. So if the United States cannot defeat Yemen, if they couldn't defeat them back then, how are they going to defeat them now if they're busy fighting Iran? So you have the Red Sea closed, you'll have the Persian Gulf closed, you'll have the end of oil and gas. That will be the end of Trump, especially then, since the American people are against this war. Even the majority of Republicans are opposed. You see not just Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson actively working against uh, the Zionists and the neocons, but you even see Bannon being critical of these policies. And if Trump makes the stupid move of carrying out aggression, Iran, when it hits back very hard and the US economy collapses, people will be in the United States will be looking for these people who caused the catastrophe. They'll be searching for them. I think that will be, I have no doubt that that will be the end of Trump's presidency.
Well, I think you're right, though, in terms of this was not planned well. I think the assumption by the Americans and Israelis were that the Israelis would be able to launch this decapitation strike. Iran would be overwhelmed, and again, they were hoping that you would have a popular revolt and regime change. So I think uh, I assume this because, well, now that it's transitioned into a war of attrition, we see that Israel is not well prepared. It's again running out of air defenses, and also the US wasn't really prepared as it has to move a lot of its capabilities toward the region. Um, but how does Iran receive assistance from any allies? You mentioned before Yemen that, of course, they just pretty much finished the war with the United States. Is there any support coming from Iran's traditional or new allies?
Well, in across the region, the axis of resistance is prepared for a next stage, and that includes Iraq. And the situation in Syria, of course, it's literally falling apart. So that's not good news for Turkey or Israel. And Erdogan and Netanyahu are uh, enemies and friends at the same time. Iran, unlike in the past, and you've read history, you are a scholar, you're a high-ranking scholar, so you know this, and I don't want to bore you with this, but in the 1980s, Iran was very isolated when Saddam Hussein, at the behest of both blocs, invaded the country. They gave him everything: missiles, jets, chemical weapons, political cover, economic support. The Arab dictatorships in the Persian Gulf gave him $200 billion back then, which would be something like, I don't know, maybe 800, $900 billion today, to wage war against the Iranian people. Iran was all alone back then, yet it prevailed. It defeated both the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc by being able to preserve its sovereignty. And Saddam Hussein went bankrupt, and that's why he invaded Kuwait, his own ally, who helped fund the war against Iran. And of course, after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the unipolar moment, the United States was able to surround Iran for a very long period of time, especially after the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. But today things have changed. The West is isolated, it's marginalized, it's declining economically, its political clout has been wrecked, its soft power destroyed, it's overextended itself on multiple fronts, whether it's China or Ukraine, which the war in Ukraine is continuing. And it's a heavy war, but not so much in the news anymore. And the global South is emerging. And so Iran today has many friends. It has China, it has Brazil, it has Russia. BRICS countries have very good relations with Iran. And I think that across the region, Iran and across the world, Iran is becoming very popular. Iran is being seen by people who used to believe the anti-Iranian propaganda as the protector of the Palestinian people, as the protector of West Asia against racism and ethno-supremacism and Western brutality and domination. So things are very different now. That's exactly why Trump wants to get involved, because nothing is going according to plan. So he wants to come in. So obviously he feels that if the Israeli regime fails, and it will fail, that this will be catastrophic for Western imperialism and Western domination. But they underestimated Iran. They underestimated the resilience of the Iranian people, Iranian culture, especially Iranian religious culture. You've been to Iran, uh, the Shia culture of the Imam Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, his martyrdom in Karbala when he refused humiliation uh, in the face of the despot of that time. He and his sister, the role that they played in supporting the oppressed and the marginalized, that is a major theme in Iranian culture. And so these days, there's a lot of talk about Imam Hussein and Karbala, but also Iran has three, well, depending on who you ask, Iran has many thousands of years of civilization. And for the United States to just, or Trump or the likes of Trump to just dismiss that and to say, to speak dismissively of Iran, that is only going to make Iranians more resilient and more determined to defeat him. So the Americans and the Israelis have failed on all levels. The collective West has failed on all levels. And as I said, this is not the only war they're waging. And so I'm optimistic, although these are painful days. It's difficult to watch footage of dead Iranian kids, murdered women, and murdered men who are just going about doing their jobs, making pastries, or it's painful, but we are determined to see this through. The issue, Glenn, has never been the nuclear program. It's never been human rights or terrorism or anything else. These are all excuses. If it's human rights, it's the West that is criminal. If it's terrorism, it's the West that's terrorism, that's terrorist. The nuclear program, it's the United States that has nuclear weapons. The IAEA has no proof that Iran is building nuclear weapons. This is all about Iran's support for the Palestinians and for the people of Gaza. And because of the fact that Iran and its allies, Yemen, for example, that they are steadfast against this Holocaust. This is the issue. If Iran forsook the Palestine, if they forsook for I can't say the word.
Let's say
If they
decided to
forsake the
forsake. Yeah, sorry.
if they forsake the Palestinian people, everything will be fine.
Well,
Sorry, I have not slept at all, and my English isn't perfect anyway.
no, no, of course. I, yeah, just my well takes me to my final question, which is, where do you see the possible end game here? Because I guess one of my concerns here is the United States has locked themselves in rhetorically. That is, Trump saying that they will only accept complete surrender of Iran, which is effectively a commitment to a forever war because Iran is not going to surrender. So, this seems ridiculous. But in a war where not just Israel is struggling, but also the United States has limited capabilities, instead they're redirecting some air defenses away from Ukraine because they need them to fight Iran. What happens if the United States is also begins to suffer. Its assets are destroyed. It doesn't really have the punching power it thought it would. Because on one hand, you wouldn't think that Iran would want to have too humiliating defeat on the Americans as well, or the Israelis. If you make the Israelis too desperate, they might resort to a nuclear weapon, for example. So, what is again? I know at the moment Iran is being bombed and suffering. I guess the suffering of Israel isn't the main priority, but just from the strategic perspective, how do you see a possible end game which doesn't which ends in a preferable way for Iran?
Well, your very question, Glenn, uh, reveals something very important, and that is how barbaric the United States and the Israeli regimes, Western regimes are. That you could even contemplate the notion that they would use nuclear weapons because they have no red lines. Remember, they've been carrying out a Holocaust in Gaza for over 20 months now, and they are shameless in their support for Israel. And right now, the reason why they're so enthusiastic about supporting Israel and Western media is talking about how sophisticated the Israeli regime is and their intelligence and their air force and the Mossad. And you saw during the first day or two, they're making up all these stories about Mossad having bases in Iran, all fabricated. But they wanted to change the debate. They wanted Gaza to be forgotten and to have a clean slate and then describe the Zionist regime in a different way. How sophisticated it is, how their intelligence finds where these commanders are and they murder them. They don't say that they're at home, just like everyone else in neighborhoods. People know where they live. They have neighbors. They're on TV or scientists or academics and professors. They murder them with their families and their neighbors and their kids and the kids of their neighbors. They don't say that. They want to change the narrative to sort of to make people forget about the Holocaust because the world has turned against the regime and against the West. So they want to somehow show Israel in a positive light now. They have no red lines, that's true. But Iran knows that appeasing the American regime, appeasing Trump, appeasing these terrorists is only going to make things worse. Iran does not want the war to expand. And if Iran wants to hit the Israeli regime much harder, it can do that very easily. I think everyone is beginning to see that. Right now, the Iranians are playing and they're forcing the Israeli, and for every missile that the Iranians fire at the Israeli regime, the Israelis and the Americans are spending 20-fold, 20 times as much as Iran is just trying to bring down those missiles and failing for the most part. So this is a very costly war for them. And in this respect, it's sort of like Ukraine. It's much more costly for the West than it is for Russia. And it is also interesting, by the way, that look how they treat Ukraine. Ukraine, they sacrificed it, they destroyed it, they ruined it, and now they throw it away like there's a word for it in Persian, but I don't know the equivalent in English, but like a dirty rag, and then they shift everything to Israel. So that's just telling the world and the people of Ukraine that, look, after all the sacrifices that you made for the West, they don't care about you. You're nothing to them. You're worthless to them. And now they'll just go defend their. Who will they defend? This ethno-supremacist, racist regime that's carrying out genocide. So this is what Iran is up against. And you imply they may not have, they don't have red lines, but Iran will not allow them to achieve any of their objectives.
Well, before I said that the United States wasn't that well prepared for this, and I mentioned the capabilities which hadn't been prepared, but it also seemed a key problem of a surprise attack these days is that they hadn't prepared the narrative because it's quite important to win over the public with a good narrative you build up over time. With Bush and the weapons of mass destruction. So all of this was, people were convinced over a long period of time. Same as, of course, with the Russians. But with Iran, I think this wasn't really done. Indeed, you have the head of the IAEA saying Iran wasn't developing nuclear weapons. You had people like Tulsi Gabbard uh, giving testimony only back in May, no, sorry, March, saying that Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon, and Trump himself saying that we can make a deal, we're close to a deal, and then suddenly launching an attack in the middle of negotiations. This is good as a surprise attack to catch the Iranians off guard, but in terms of building a narrative, I think this was a mistake. As you said, they lost people like Tucker Carlson, Bannon, and yeah, across the board. So I think this could be a huge problem for the Americans. I only saw today in The Guardian some article that why is Europe in on this? Why are we joining the Americans? First, backing a genocide in Gaza, and now we're gonna um, even yeah, have no criticism, no condemnation of a surprise attack on Iran, attacks on nuclear reactors. I mean, this is really, yeah, crazy stuff. So it gives me some optimism, though, that again, when we speak of the West, that not I think the governments are definitely with the United States, but among the people, there are people who see that this is wrong, that this is yeah, that the narrative doesn't is fit that anymore. So yeah, yeah, it's not that much optimism when you're in the middle of a war, but at least you get the impression something could shift here, though. But anyways, yeah, Professor Marandi, thank you so much, and stay safe. And you should, yeah, probably leave the offices there. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you very much. Just one final point, and that is that for the very issue, because of the points that you mentioned, which are absolutely correct, there is a strong belief in Iran that the Israeli regime or their allies in Washington will carry out some sort of false flag attack in order to change the mood and in order to convince the public to uh, change direction. So that is something that we are watching carefully. But there is that belief that we may be seeing a false flag operation in the coming days. It's possible. No one knows for sure, but that is what people believe is quite possible. And also, I just like to add that basically U.S. and Western policy over the last 20 months, 21 months, has exposed them to the world so vividly that all of their anti-Iranian narratives that they have been building for 40 some years and their regional allies like Qatar and Saudi Arabia through all these Wahhabi and Salafi uh, television channels and media centers and so on, that they've been all this anti-Iranian uh, propaganda that has been coming up from across the region. All of this is melting away very rapidly, and it is their own. It is, they've exposed themselves, and their allies in the region have exposed themselves. Turkey, Erdogan continues to export oil, transport oil to Netanyahu. He trades. Everyone has been exposed, and this, I think, is uh, probably the most catastrophic aspect of this whole 2 years. That the emperor has no clothes, and that the emperor's allies have no clothes either, and people are witnessing something that they had never seen before.
Well, in the 90s and early 2000s, the big academic discussions was around American soft power, how it invested so much in, yeah, the soft power. It didn't need to wield force because the role of attraction and the values and ideas was enough to bring people on board. I think it's safe to say that this has been completely thrown away. And regarding the false flag attack, I did notice that this was also suggested by Ray McGovern. Again, he had yes, 27 years in the CIA. He was also the chair of the National Intelligence Estimates, and he was the one who gave the daily briefs to President Reagan every day. So he also think that there's a real chance of this because you can't really ignore the need or the importance of narrative control. And the narrative has been completely lost here. There's no one's in control, and I think Trump failing to even have support from his own core base, is a good indication of this. So something both, militarily and in terms of narrative control, I think both sides of the war is going terribly wrong. So you might be correct in that, a fear or prediction. So. But anyways, yet again, thank you for your time and please stay safe.
Thank you. Have a good day.
And likewise.